The opinions expressed during this show are those of the individual participants and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of their associated organizations or CBGTV.com. You're watching the Cannabis Broadcasting Group here at CBGTV.com.
Is 420 camping your thing? Do you like cannabis cups? Want to learn more about cannabis? Enjoy music festivals? Living on the East Coast or looking for a really good reason to visit? Then Harvest Fest is calling your name.
Join us the weekend of July 14th to 16th at Fox Mountain Camping Park in the Annapolis Valley, Nova Scotia, to meet like-minded people, have your cannabis questions answered, listen to great bands, and have a blast.
Service lots available and camping is included in festival admission. $60 for the weekend, or $30 for Friday, and $40 for Saturday. Food trucks, hot showers, flush toilets, and accessible washrooms. Rolling contest sponsored by Canadian Lumber Limited, with chances to win a case of rolling papers and more throughout the weekend.
For info about attending or vending, email chair@mumm.ca. Hope to see you there.
Welcome to Green Crush. What is Green Crush? Well, that's an easy question. Green Crush is green cannabis crushing cancer. Green cannabis crushes laws restricting access to the cancer crusher. But I didn't want to put all of that in the title. I didn't die. That's the theme song. Thanks to Leg Zegev. I'll have to get that correct by the end of the show. It's Zeg Legev. I hope that's right. I wrote it down, but that's not here right now. That's not the time to come back. No. Leg, Zeg. I'll get back to you. It's okay. All right. So the theme song. I just realized yesterday when I was prepping the theme song that if you break down the word theme song, it's the me song, right? That makes sense too. It's the me song. The me song is about this show. It's called The Reflection, actually, by that gentleman, I think. And it fits the show, I believe, because this is all a reflection of everything that I've been going through. And I'm happy to try to share that information to the betterment of everyone else that might be going down a dark hallway on a gurney being told it's okay when you don't really know if it is or not, and it probably isn't. So maybe you're listening to Green Crush because someone told you about the show, because someone you know or yourself has been left with a medical diagnosis that's not any kind of fun. And it's all bad news. That's what happened to me. And that's why I'm listening to all of this information that I'm now trying to synthesize into a reasonable, understandable, digestible means out of your medical problem. Now, I'm not a doctor. Proud to say, didn't go to all that school. I would have liked to have learned some kind of doctoring, I suppose, and never got around to it. Things happen in life, and the next thing you know, you're doing something else. And this show is what I'm doing because I have the passion to share what at the far end of the tunnel that I have traveled through was could have been remarkably easier and less traumatic had I access to the information that I am now trying to share with everyone who has an internet connection. And if you don't, go to the library and download something. That's what Green Crush is. That's what this is. So we are live on the air right now. Of course, it's not live when you're listening to it on a download, but that's okay. You're alive, or your friend's alive, or your mom's alive. And you got back to me to tell me thanks for helping out with that. Or you got back to me to say, hey, none of that worked. And there'll be reasons for that as well. But we are podbrodding. Is that, I'm going to use that word now, podbrodding? Or should let's turn to Russell. Russell's the tech here at the show. You don't have to, I've got the two things. We're broadcasting and we're podcasting, and it's live right now. So are we podbrodding or broadpodding? Or is that even, because if you use podding, it's two D's, right? And it's like a brand new word maybe. Anyway, that's what we're doing. From the Pacific Junction Hotel in beautiful downtown Toronto's east side, part of the Eggplant Digital Network, Canada's leading creative content hub, with Russell, who works here at Girth Radio, where we put all of these different cool shows together. So thanks for dialing us up. I hope you can find here information that will help you the way it helped me. So if you want to get in touch with us, it's at greencrush.pod. No, sorry, God. It's at at Green Crush Pod. Maybe that's harder to say than it ought to be. It's at Green Crush Pod. All right. So here we go with the first part of the show is going to be a little biographical. I'm going to catch up a little bit. We've had a guest on the show, and we've had a few shows without, and I want to keep the thread going so you understand who I am. I said I'm not a doctor. It's true. I'm not a doctor. So why is this guy talking about medical cannabis? Oh, well, that's because I was diagnosed by a doctor with stage 4 aggressive advanced prostate cancer that had already metastasized into my bones. Ta-da! That was a pretty fun Wednesday afternoon. And at that point, I was scared. It was 2013. And in the political climate, in both who's running the country or at the helm and appearing to be running the country, this red Justin fella as opposed to the blue Steven idiot who was around before, it seems like a million years ago and just yesterday. But in 2013, when I got news that I was certainly sicker than you'd ever want to hear, that there was nowhere to go other than to wait 5 more weeks until I got to see the expert who would put the finishing touches on my prognosis. And so in the meantime, I was afraid. I was working on a television show special that I had been affiliated with for some years. And getting that diagnosis about how terrible, and then you go home and look up stage 4 cancer and how do you get back to stage 3, and they say, well, you can't do that, you're just going to, it's like you're halfway down a water slide at a theme park, and then you go, oh yeah, no, I want to go back to the top. It's not happening. So you have to go through with it. And there I was, diagnosed with this terrible thing. At least I had an answer. At least I knew what was going on after so many months of increasing agony and failing physical constitution in many regards. And so then the next day, I woke up and took my morphine like a good little boy. And I also made sure to guzzle down an 8-ounce glass of prune juice that we had obtained from the local late-night drugstore for an exorbitant price. Did you know that Canada's national drugstore chain can charge up to $6 or $7 for some prune juice? Anyway, why are you drinking prune juice, old man? It's because the more prune you take in, the easier it is to go to the bathroom. And when you start taking morphine, the more difficult it is to go to the bathroom and so to defecate, right? And I can't seem to find the balance. I don't want to be in the place where people talk about, oh, more, I can't take a shit. Oh God, it's so hard. So I got guzzled up on the prune juice, and thankfully my morphine journey required zero in the way of defecational discomfort. Hey, hopefully lunch is over for most of you. You can't really listen to this show at lunch. I mean, I think you should listen to it at all costs, particularly if you're ill or you know someone who is. But, it's not a lunchtime show. It's not a lunch show. We're not talking about some band playing at the open park in the middle of summer and ain't that nice. There's going to be a lot of gross stuff on this show. I got all kinds of things to say about procedures and catheters. I had a catheter inside my body for 12 weeks. Now, that's nothing compared to needing to have one forever. But having a pipe shoved up your business and into your rock and roll corky prostate, that was 12 weeks. And it was broken up into 6 because what I was doing was I was taking 6 weeks worth of a drug that was prescribed to me, that was said to me that what it was going to do was loosen up the prostate a little bit. This is a cancerous prostate that's been riddled for a couple of years now. And they're trying to goose it enough so that it would loosen, because it had gone from like a grape to a cork. And you want it to be more like a grape and biologically sound, but this thing was so hard that it actually got so like a rock, like a little acorn in there, and they needed to drill it out. See, I told you it's not a lunchtime show. Anyway, so you can't imagine getting a diagnosis for stage 4 cancer and then going into a comedy show that you do once a year, and they throw the script down on the table. And all I could think about was I'm reading a comedy script and I was just told I've got stage 4 cancer. And the two things were, it was really hard to put them in the same head because I wasn't going to share it with anybody. You don't go to your producer or your anybody and say, hey, I got stage 4 cancer. So is it okay if I show up 10 minutes late? You can't get any of that special treatment, or that's what I thought. Maybe you can, maybe you can't. Maybe someone else would kick the door down and demand every kind of consideration. But I just wanted to get away with it quietly and not tell anyone. And it was fear. That's what it was. It was, I could talk about it all day, but it's just fear and privacy. And you don't want to lose a job, and you don't want to be, thought of as a leprosy victim pariah. Like, oh, don't go near that guy. But that's the kind of perception that can go on. So that's what happens when, in my experience, you're dealt the card that tells you you're probably going to die and really soon, and the next day you're trying to earn your daily keep, reading jokes off a page about things that suddenly no longer matter. And then getting through that period of time was one of the worst experiences of the entire journey. I was in this tunnel. My partner at the time knew what was going on, and she was very helpful, but also shocked and freaked out. Like, who wouldn't be? It just put an immediate, harsh, unexpected downturn, left turn into everything, and you're just focusing on trying to get through to the very next day. But luckily, this is when I came across the Green Crush. This is when I came across doing a little research and going really deep into a notion that I had the day that I was diagnosed, which was to find out more about the medical cannabis community and what does it mean, and the fact that I had stopped smoking cannabis several years ago recreationally for my own reasons was no longer important. And I decided to get interested in this fourth door, because that's what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with the fourth door to get to stage 5. So that's what happened to me when I had months to live. They said months to live. They said no options. So I really want to pick apart some of the critics that get on top of me right now, and I really want to have some of them on the show. So if you hate all of this and you're illegal in the judiciary or some kind of medical purveyor or what have you, I do want to speak with you because I want to know where I'm wrong, if I'm wrong. But I know that I was told I was going to die and I'm still here, so I'm right about that. It kind of informs a lot of my other decisions. When I get that same weird sort of feeling of comfortable knowingness and a decision to move forward on something, I was able to get those same bizarre tinglings that I first started to recognize with the cancer in the tunnel of privacy and fear, where I told just the very minimum few people in my immediate circle of family and friends, just a few people. It's embarrassing to get a fatal disease. That's what that works out to. It's embarrassing. Now, if you get elephant AIDS because you went out and, tarted it up with some really slutty pachyderms, then I don't feel sorry for you. You should be embarrassed. But to be embarrassed about a natural or unnatural devolvement of the cellular health is, it's no fun to do. And it's no fun, certainly no fun for me to be a comedian and do it because I didn't want to talk about it in the moment. I wanted to get through it. I didn't want to admit that I was going to die. Especially since the green crush that I started to take just 3 days after I was diagnosed. And then 3 days later, it started to noticeably improve the pain levels in my body. I could bend and do certain things that I had previously been unable to do. And so by the time I took my 700 PSA warning score into the expert 5 weeks later, 700 PSA is ridiculously, impossibly high. And by the time I got to see this cat, it was only at 375 or 374, which is, ridiculous. And if you found out you had a 374 PSA, you'd probably be writing your final decisions in life. But it's half of 700 pretty much, and almost. And so I knew I was on the right direction. And I found that out intrinsically in my own body. It was a natural feeling like, I can't believe this, but I know that I'm actually feeling better today than I have since January. And that was exciting. And so now I take a lot of shit from people who say, I don't want to hear any of this. I want a peer-reviewed paper to tell me. Now, I don't know who's paying the peers to review the papers, but they're not all on board. But I will reference that I do have a molecular biologist here who is explaining how THC completely kills cancer cells. This is important to know because there's a lot of candy ass kind of attitude going on with the cannabis legalization right now. Well, is there any way you can get the CBDs without the THC? Because it's immoral to change your scope of perception. Is it immoral to change? I'm having a coffee right now, and I'm having a glass of water. That changes my perception also, particularly when I'm heading down the road to dehydration. Chocolate changes your perception. Right? You person that just got dumped? Sitting on the couch with a bucket of ice cream. So let's go to the molecular biologist explaining how THC, this stuff that gets you high, stop taking it out. This show's it's basically an hour long. We go a little long every time, but it's basically about a couple of things. Look, they don't give you a lot of options. Surgery, radiation, chemotherapy, they don't give you a lot, and they didn't give me any because I was too far gone. That's in quotes, too far gone for treatment. Done. Stage 4, finished. So for the critics who constantly find a way to get a hold of me and say, you're being irresponsible, you're teaching people not to listen to their doctor, that's dangerous, that's on you. To them I say, I think I know the substance you're lacking right now in your life that's leaving you with such ridiculous thought patterns as to tell me that I'm not listening to my doctor. I listened to my doctor. My doctor said, you don't have an option. So I created one. I was provided with one. I was open to one. You can say it's denial when you listen to your doctor telling you that you have stage 4 cancer. You can say that. And I'm sure that that's what I had going on there. But there was something more than that going on. And I really do feel in my scope of awareness now that that is the truth, or I would not be sitting here telling you about it. All of the data, by the way, the doctor information from the big hospitals on University Avenue in Toronto is available. So I never hesitate to tell people I was in that state and I am in this state. So we're basically talking about another option, a fourth door to get to stage 5, which I am told does not exist. But that's what I'm calling it, because here I am. I have to be dead right now. According to mainstream medicine of the world, I have to be dead right now. And it's been a few years. But I'm not. So this is what fuels my fire to tell you that Dr. Cristina Sanchez, who is a molecular biologist at Complutense University in Madrid, Spain, explains how THC, which is the main psychoactive constituent of the cannabis plant, completely kills cancer cells. So this is from Collective Evolution, saying they published an article examining a recent case where doctors used cannabis to treat leukemia, and they have that article. And you can read other articles about how cannabis is an effective treatment and cure for cancer. I haven't met a peer to review me. Anecdotal evidence is not a negative thing. It's a good thing, because without anecdotal evidence, you don't get enough people hearing about it and thinking about it, and then you don't have people making those studies and finding out those answers. But we have a shitload of these studies, and I guess we'll have to put them up on a website or something as this little triangle builds into something that can reach more people who've been given no option and are going to go home and die and are completely convinced that this doctor who just told them they're not going to make it is correct. They're not always correct. A lot of times they're not always correct. Next week, we'll be talking about how often doctors are incorrect. Cannabinoids refer to any group of related compounds that include cannabidinol and cannabidiol. I really have trouble with some of the words, and the active constituents of cannabis. They activate cannabinoid or cannabinoid receptors in the body. The body itself produces compounds called endocannabinoids or cannabinoids, and they play a role in many processes within the body that help to create a healthy environment. So maybe stop thinking about curing cancer, like going after cancer and choking it out. You have to make the area where the cancer is going to live inhospitable to disease. Like if you tried to grow a plant in your garden and you didn't properly fertilize it and you didn't properly take care of it, it doesn't grow. It's not balanced well. The soil's not good. There aren't enough minerals or whatever. Well, that's you. And you need to put this plant in your body. So Dr. Cristina Sanchez, Google that with a C. Cristina Sanchez, molecular biologist, explains it. They've been proven to reduce cancer cells as they help rebuild the immune system. You know, the thing chemo's kicking at while you're lying there on the gurney. Although not every strain of cannabis has the same effect, that's true. More and more patients are seeing success in cancer reduction. Cancer reduction. And in a short period of time, by using cannabis. You'll have a cop sometime or other telling you that he knows it's bullshit, that joints could actually cure you, but that's not what we're talking about. So stop framing the argument in such a ridiculous way. It's not about joints. It's not about joints at all. It's about using a plant that's outside that you're allowed to use because you decided you're going to use it. It's about that, and it's about taking it in as a concentrated substance for emergency purposes and taking it in a holistic food manner, in a dietary manner, in a smoothie manner, in a vegetable fruit manner, otherwise. And as we said last week, a lovely politician from England was telling us all about how it's a problem that we still have laws against cannabis. And from the legislature, this gentleman actually recommended.
I think we have to say to those who put up with the barbaric stupidity and cruelty of government policy to act in a way of civil disobedience. We know most of the countries in the world allow this most ancient of medicines, been used for 5,000 years in every continent in the world. It's used for medicinal purposes. But I would call on people, and I know we're not supposed to do this as members, to break the law.
That's what I'm calling on. That's what I'm calling on. Maybe I could also be a United Kingdom politician in Parliament. I doubt it. To break the law. To break the law. Because the law is wrong. Because the law is getting in the way of people understanding that this is a healthful property. There's a certain band of intelligence and awareness and activity and connectivity in society. There are complete morons, and then there are geniuses, and everybody else is in between. And there are certain people in society who are so easily led that the only reason they don't try cannabis, the only reason they don't want it, and I'm talking about people that I think would be better served using it because they are horribly ill, not just anybody, but there are people that won't use it. There's a percentage of folks who won't use it or do anything illegal because it's illegal. I know people that have shunned a helpful methodology of restoring their fucking life. Showed it to them, and they choose to say, oh yeah, no, that's against the law. I wouldn't want to do that. So you're going to continue along in this no-win way that you're already at a crossroads of basically a dead end at this point. And you won't break the law? Who gives a shit about the law if you're dead? Like, do you care about the law if you're dead? Is this too metaphysical as a conversation point? I hope not. I really don't understand why people won't try to do something that would save their life. And so now that it's been shown and now that it's been proven by Christine Sanchez and so many other people, now that we've got the positive aspects out of the way, let's talk about the taking the law into our own hands aspect out of the way. I have done that left, right, and center. And without doing that, I wouldn't be here right now. To the chagrin of some and the celebration of others, I'm sure. But there's a lot of lies going on. Let's get to a different segment now. I'm going to talk about something I just found out about recently, and I want to make sure that that it's not taken in the wrong way. But here we go. Let's do this one. It's called
Paul Flynn.
Paul Flynn. No, that's who that was. Right. Paul Flynn was the guy that I had on earlier. But what I'm trying to do now is I want to talk about this fascinating story. It's on the Crush page now. If you're on Facebook, it's that cannabinoids or cannabinoids, like those found in marijuana, occur naturally elsewhere. You know where else we have this is it's in breast milk. Ta-da! Talk about a green crush. I guess that just depends on the size of the cup. So I'm not exactly sure where that story is, love, but it's on Alexinoid. It's a kind of a story that's let's see that we're gonna have to research that one. Let's put those breasts on hold right now. Those are the cannabinoid milk breasts. Okay, so I jumped ahead. It's only a podcast. This isn't a national broadcast. It's a podcast. But they're saying, so we're going to look at this, and I know I'm going to get huge interest in this from both men and women, that cannabinoids like those in marijuana found in breast milk. You know, so that's kind of important. Hey, have you got a son that has terrible seizures? I think I lost a volume thing or something, Russell. Maybe I turned something down. I don't know. Could be. Did you change anything? No, we're good. Okay. So sometimes kids have seizures, and sometimes hundreds of them at a time in a month. And they've been taking cannabinoids or cannabinoids or cannabis or CBDs and THCs, and not so much with the THCs with the kids, but they don't have seizures anymore, or it drastically limits the rate of seizure. So we're going to boil this down into a few sentences. Just because you're told by society that you are not going to live does not mean you're not going to live. If you take information that is out there into your own hands, you can still be here and not die. And it's been crazy ever since then, because for me, the transformational shift of different kinds of government, different kinds of, zero opportunity to work, all of that's changed now. I'm very excited about getting my life back, although it's a different life. But you have to keep on top of these clowns with their laws and their bullshit. You have to get back to being able to break the law. Because the law itself is illegal. The laws that they put together to criminalize cannabis, the way they brought them in, the reasons they used, are all false. It's all a lie in the first place. And I'm saying this too, specifically the sticklers who always want to stick to the law, and they don't want to break the law, and they think it's rude, and they think it's offensive, and they think it's immoral, and they think it's disgusting. Well, they're all wrong. And they're most importantly wrong because they're trapped in a little bubble where they believe they're right. And I get to be in that bubble because I was told I was going to die, and I'm still here. Okay, so also want to throw this in. This thing gets covered almost all the time on this show, but I'm trying to make a point here. This was released in the 19th of August in 2009. And it's from cancerresearchuk.org. Cannabis chemicals stop cancer growth. Cannabis chemicals stop prostate cancer growth. Active chemicals in cannabis have been shown to halt prostate cancer cell growth, according to research published in the British Journal of Cancer. I wish my doctor had a subscription to the British Journal of Cancer so that when 4 or 5 years later I walked into his office, he'd say, hey, try this, instead of saying, hey, you're done. So that's on there. That's on there. That's always going to be on there. So let's go to the usage guidelines. Can we get, here's some good news. South Africans have just legalized cannabis for personal use. So first you've got the uptight people. There's first the, let's not use cannabis at all. Then there's the people saying, okay, we'll use it, but we'll just use CBDs and we won't use the THC because that's immoral and that's dirty and that's scary. You got those people. Then you got the people actually legalizing it and understanding that it works and that these laws are over. And then those people will say, yeah, but we should have a low THC version, and we should make sure the government can tell us exactly how much we can have at any given moment. Don't believe in that. Don't believe in that. So here's this thing from btl.co.za. ZA. That's from South America itself. Or sorry, South Africa itself. The Western Cape High Court has just, that's funny, yeah. The Western Cape High Court has just ruled that cannabis prohibition in South Africa is unconstitutional. That's my point I was just saying. I was just saying that. I was just saying how the illegality of cancer is itself an aberration and something to be illegal. So that's where you have to set your marker down. Not on that it's illegal now, that it was illegal to be illegal in the first place. Unconstitutional. It's a fucking medicine. And it works. Works really well. And maybe it's not going to work for everybody's every single thing, and I've never said that. It's not the straw man I want to kill today. All right. So they're saying in South Africa that adults have the right to use, grow, or possess cannabis in the privacy of their homes. Wow, that's neat. You can't take it outside, but at least it's going in the right direction. The South Africans break the law. That's right. That's, of course, our friend from England, the Labour MP. He's the shadow secretary, the former frontbencher, but his name is Paul Flynn, saying that the Class B substance, that's how they rank it in England at the Palace of Westminster, was the only way to get through to the government, to call on people to break the law. That's coming from the government. So now there are a lot of reasons why that's not going on. There are a lot of reasons why that's not going on. And unfortunately, most of them are made out of bullshit. A lot of them involve police. I spoke last week about a woman who is she's the police chief of, Fredericton in New Brunswick, Canada. And it sounds like I'm getting farther away from my own microphone. I don't know what's going on, but as long as it sounds good over there, that's okay. This was Police Chief Leanne Fitch. And we all know what that rhymes with, huh? Brienne. Anyway, Leanne Fitch predicts higher costs for the Fredericton police when marijuana is no longer against the law. And she's got this sucky face on. Like, who cares? This is on the cbc.ca website. And I talked about this on the previous show, so I won't spend too much time. But these police are whining about how it's going to cost more money. They're going to need more money. It shouldn't be like that. This is like tipping a table, one way to the other, and then the ball bearing rolls up instead of the other way down. The artificial creation of bullshit laws around police, like we're supposed to mollycoddle them, like, oh, it's going to cost the police more money to do. Oh, okay, never mind then. That's okay. We won't use any of this healthful substance to cure our fucking cancer. Like Leanne Fitch and all of the other police and the police chiefs in this country complaining about the costs going up and that they're going to need more money, etc. It's not really, I don't think it's true on the first hand that they shouldn't need it. It doesn't make sense that they need it. But people actually believe this stuff. The folks that understand that's illegal won't use it. So they're just below the level. And then once they make the change, then a lot of those people who didn't want to use it because it was illegal will say, and this is incredible to me, but they'll say, well, it's legal now. I'll try it now. And so good for them, and I hope it saves them. But this Leanne Fitch here, she's really upset about it. So I thought I'd spend a little time looking at Leanne Fitch, right? And what you have with Leanne Fitch is that she herself has a lot of questions about the legality and the ethics and all of that stuff. And so I thought, get off that case, Officer Fitch. Because she has a lot of things going on in her own. She's had investigations going on against her conduct within the confines of her job. Yeah, Leanne Fitch. So go to Global News and you'll see that she is herself being investigated by the New Brunswick Police Commission. This is a little bit ago, but Global's not putting the date. Oh, here it is. Yeah, it's from January 12, 2016, way ahead of the deadline here. Says that Fredericton Police Force has confirmed that Chief Fitch is being investigated. They can't comment on the time on what she was being investigated, but they can say that they received a complaint against her and that it's been handed over to the police commission to follow up and that they will be investigating. And that there was controversy going on in that department that year. So there were some cops in Fredericton charged with multiple offenses, and including assault and uttering threats. And Fitch has released statement. It's all quiet. It's all quiet. So let's get into your dirty underwear, Leanne Brienne. Let's find out what your freaking problem is before you start telling people who are sick they can't use the medicine, and you're going to whine and bitch and moan about the fact that your police budget isn't as high as you'd like to be. But the fact is, once this shit becomes legal, we can afford to just lay people off in the police department. You don't need as many. If you take all the arrests of marijuana, all of the protesting people that are trying to bring marijuana, now let's just call it cannabis, marijuana was a demonization. If we could just bring this to the fore right about this time and make people understand that it's not about what the cops want. It's about what's right and what's healthy and what could be used. And let's get rid of people like Leanne Fitch. Let the investigation take place. Because what's happening is they're arresting people because it's still illegal. And then they are hassling them to the point of, I mean, if you get arrested, that just sucks, right? Your life's upside down, especially if they press charges and you lose and go to jail. But hey, while all that's going on, Canada's justice system is crumbling as the raids continue. And it's not even just processing those cases. It's the fact that there are so many of these stupid, mindless, illegal, immoral busts and thievery. They just take it, right? There's so much of that the justice system isn't working everywhere else. According to Huffington Post, Canada's justice system's in the midst of a major crisis. Many hundreds of important cases have been dropped due to a lack of court resources. Let's do a tally then. Let's get on a spreadsheet and find out how much money. Let's call every single police station. Let's call every jurisdictional courthouse and say, what percentage of cases going through your little system of twistedness is related to cannabis? How much of this is friggin' pointless? There will be numbers. Let's look at those numbers first. Let's look at all the cops spending time arresting people, doing things that aren't wrong, bunging up the court system so that people that take hammers and hit people in the head in alleyways and bona fide idiots that need to be taken down all of a sudden don't have room in the court system. So thanks, HuffPo. Canada's justice system, major crisis? Sure. Ontario alone, 6,500 cases could soon be dropped due to delays, including 38 for homicide or attempted murder, because you want to bust people smoking weed. These are the fucking people running things? Got to get off of this wagon where, well, things need to take time to change. No, they don't. They even passed a law a couple of years ago where it was legal to vape on a patio. They passed a law in Toronto. It was legal to vape on a patio. They said, okay, we've looked at it. We're going to put it in. They put the law in. It's legal to vape on a patio. They pulled it the next day. Pulled the law. No other law does this happen. They always say, oh, well, we got to do things slowly. Never in my life have I seen so much bullshit and lies and information suppression. You can't believe the amount of information that was sucked out of the ether. But even libraries and books, all kinds of information has been taken down. So that's the Huffington Post telling us that the system's crumbling while these dummies are running around busting people for a friggin' natural substance. Let's let that murderer go because Buddy's got lettuce in his garden. Get out of here. They're actually looking forward to it because they're going to get a lot of toys. They're going to get a lot of ways and means to find out if you're under the influence while you're driving. And unfortunately, none of the science for that shit works. We need to push back on these things. We need to push back on these attempts at law before they happen. Because as has been pointed out, and I've spent more time thinking about it, either way, it sucks in Canada. They make it legal. This bundle of shit pile of laws they've got going through are going to be nothing but problematic. We're going to be changing them left, right, and center. And then they'll say, oh, we can't change it now. We just brought it in. But meanwhile, when they had a vape law, it was gone the next day when they decided they didn't like it, which means somebody with a lot of money picked up a phone and said, get it out. So I'm kind of done with all of this. And if you're coming along with me, let's talk about it at Puff Jam on Saturday. Puff Jam. Da, 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 da. They don't have a theme song, so I'm throwing one in there, Puff Jam. Puff Jam's in Burlington on Saturday, and I just wonder if you've ever understood being in an environment with people that are completely relaxed and aware of the medicinal purposes of the substance itself, and find out ways to deliver it to your body that are more intense or less intense, and just learn more about this particular substance that's amazing. Because we're going to bring it in. And I know in the Maritimes, one of the cops there, Leanne Fitch, she's really upset about all of this kind of thing happening. I say take it a little closer to home. New Brunswick police officer, ask your Nova Scotia, right next door, RCMP officer who's been accused of stealing and trafficking cocaine. That's right, a cop trafficking cocaine. Staff sergeant charged with drug trafficking, an investigation into a theft of cocaine. Craig Robert Burnett, 48, charged with theft of cocaine, trafficking cocaine, breach of trust, and laundering proceeds of crime. So hopefully he'll go down a little bit before the police union steps in and makes sure he doesn't have too tough of a time with it. These are the people wagging the laws around. This guy's busted people for cannabis. I guarantee it. This punk, Craig Robert Burnett. I will guarantee you that motherfucker has busted people for weed. I always said if you really want to get great weed, what you got to do is bust into a police station and find your way down to the storage locker. But if they just made a bust a couple of days ago, you better hurry because it's probably not going to be there. All of this is going on under the nose of our Prime Minister, sexy Justin Trudeau, on the cover of the Rolling Stone. And all these dumb people thinking he's a fantastic guy. Or people that just haven't peeled back enough of the layers. It's not that they're dumb. They're falling to the propaganda of this idiot Trudeau, the genius, who followed through on Stephen Harper's helpful ways, a previous conservative prime minister that Trudeau went to get set up business with the Saudi Arabian Empire to sell the military equipment. Then people that didn't want them to sell military equipment to folks that abuse rights as so oppressively as they do in Saudi Arabia were saying, don't sell that to them. But General Dynamics of London that makes war machines in Canada wanted to make some money, and it's jobs, jobs, jobs. So off they sold this military equipment to Saudi Arabia, despite my protests and the protests of, I'm sure, millions of other people, realizing what you're trying to do is you're trying to have Canadian jobs in a military hardware purveyor company so that we can make money here in Canada. And people we were saying, what the fuck? You're giving bad guys weapons. Why are you doing this? So now it turns out in the Globe and Mail, August 7th, that the Trudeau government registers concern with Saudi Arabia over apparent armored vehicle use. You sold them the armored vehicles. Of course, they're going to use them. We knew there were human rights violations in Saudi Arabia. We knew they were probably going to use them in the commission of the cutting off of heads at a rate far above ISIS, which is another consideration. Yeah, no one gives a shit about cars that beep, right, anymore. That's over now, right? Hey, someone's trying to steal the car. No one cares about that anymore. But I sent a tweet here to the minister of what's her name, Chrystia Freeland. She's a foreign minister of some sort. I can't even remember her portfolio. Doesn't matter. She didn't listen. Trudeau government has reached out to Saudi Arabia and Western allies to register unease over Riyadh's apparent use of Canadian armored vehicles against its own citizens. Foreign Affairs Minister Chrystia Freeland said, "We've expressed our concerns to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia," she said. I expressed my concerns to you before you sold the fucking equipment. Anyway, this isn't a show necessarily all about foreign military situations, but we have contributed to the demise and the death of so many people in Saudi Arabia right now. You can't believe how many kids, children are dead in Yemen right now with our assistance, the assistance of the West and Canada. And yet these punks are going to tell me that they're all concerned about the children and the availability of cannabis. Well, don't worry about it. You guys will dream up a little segment I want to call, this is Turn the Page, Politicians Against Green Everywhere. So they have come up with Canada's lower risk cannabis use guidelines. Let's get to that right now. Is that okay? Can we do that? Let's do that. We have time for that. We have time for some guidelines. There's always time for guidelines. All right. Oh, I see what it is. My mic was coming down. It was coming down. I was touching some kind of button over here, Russell, so maybe the whole show's a little bit quieter than, I don't know. All right. Okay, here we go. This is your taxpayer dollars at work. These are available everywhere now. Canada's lower risk cannabis use guidelines, brought to you by the fine purveyors of misinformation at the Canadian Research Initiative in Substance Misuse and CAMH. That's the Center for Addiction and Mental Health here in Canada. So here's the flyer. We won't have time to do the whole thing, but you should download this thing. It's called the LRCUG, LRCUG. Here's the first friggin' thing they have on this flyer, this informational bulletin. Cannabis use is common, especially among adolescents and young adults. Okay, this completely marginalizes everybody I know who has been using it since the 60s and is still doing fantastically well over the last 50 years. So that's fake. Let's just drop this right into media mulch. This isn't Turn the Page. This is media mulch. This is expensive media. We paid for it, but hey. There are well-documented risks from cannabis use to both immediate and long-term health. Okay, what are those? Okay, here we go. The main risks include cognitive, psychomotor, and memory impairments, hallucinations, and impaired perception. Impaired driving and injuries, including fatalities, mental health problems, including psychosis, dependence, pulmonary bronchial problems, and reproductive problems. Okay, well, here's why a lot of that is... Here's what's wrong with that right out of the top. The main risks include cognitive, psychomotor, and memory impairments. Now, do they have that sign hanging underneath the liquor store? I'm not sure. Impairments of the memory, hallucinations, impaired perception. And when they say impaired perception, what they mean is you're not actually doing what we want you to do, and you're looking at things differently than we'd like to look at them. But worst of all, you're kind of depending on this thing in a mental health problem kind of way. Well, yeah, I know that I do depend on it in a way. I depend on it. I do depend on it. I depend on it daily, and I depend on it because it's a plant, and I also depend on salads and beans and corn and other shit like that that grows in the ground that's meant for our benefits. But I will admit that it's difficult for me sometimes to get motivated and to get going, particularly on agenda of what looks like false narratives and bogus missions, such as like chasing around pieces of paper at an ever escalating rate to pay down a debt that'll never get paid off. So sometimes I do need a little kick to get started. I might have trouble concentrating on things at times, and I do find that it helps me zone in better. Okay. Sometimes I don't want to hear music or listen to things or work on things that I used to enjoy. And I find that it does help me to shake some feelings of sometimes feeling very alone in the world, or all the different things that you have to ponder. Sometimes you can feel a little less than comfortable, and cannabis use will help that. And this is amazing that it's considered to be an immoral use of cannabis to take down what effectively are also symptoms that people who use properly prescribed drugs, such as antidepressants and anti-anxiety drugs. Hey, you ever have a tough time sleeping? So if I use cannabis to help me get to sleep, which it does a fantastic job of, by the way, which is where you do heal, do most of your healing, it's a problem. I'm using it as a crutch, am I? Well, how about the mood swings that people go through? I've been through those. I've had a lot of times with the anger, and that has gone back through since I was a young child. But I find that this very much mitigates any kind of anger. It just puts things in an obvious sense. It changes your perception. This is what they mean when I'm sure this is what they mean when they say impaired perception. It means, hey, you're not buying our bullshit right now. Hey, you think the emperor is naked right now.
To those who put up with the barbaric stupidity and cruelty of government policy to act in a way of civil disobedience. We know most of the countries in the world allow this most ancient of medicines, been used for 5,000 years in every continent in the world. It's used for medicinal purposes.
And that's all I'm talking about right now. Right now, I'm just talking about medicinal purposes, because those elements that I just described to you, the different problems that I have and many people have sometimes, it's called PTSD. So if I could give you a non-toxic, non-addictive medication for PTSD, you're going to tell me that I'm an irresponsible son of a bitch and I'm giving false hope? Well, you're free to have that thought. Maybe go have it somewhere else. So the number one recommendation from the LRCUG, the guidelines for usage of marijuana, recommendation number one, abstinence. The most effective way to avoid any risks of cannabis use is to abstain from use. What the fuck? And the most effective way to get rid of a headache is decapitation. Those who decide to use need to recognize that they incur the risks of a variety of acute and or long-term adverse health and social outcomes. Is any of this printed on the side of prescription pill bottles, by the way? I was just wondering. These risks will vary in their likelihood and severity with user characteristics. You know, the way somebody who likes to drink sometimes gets a little crazy and punchy and nuts. And somebody else that drinks the same amount likes to fall asleep and is so easygoing, it's unbelievable. Yeah, so everything's different. Everything affects people differently. But your number one recommendation is abstinence. So you haven't done your fucking homework, and I don't really feel like reading the rest of this stupid thing, but I'm going to. Because as soon as you open with, hey, I'm an idiot, why do you listen to the rest of it? I do have my tie on today, so you can know that this is all the truth. Look at this green crush tie. So we'll get rid of the LRCUG. It's just pissing me off already. A lot of people are against it anyway. According to the publicdiscourse.com, 4 states in the District of Columbia have lifted their prohibitions on recreational marijuana. Recreational now, we're back to. And But these folks say that we shouldn't be doing this. They say it's a psychoactive substance, like coffee, introduced into the body for purpose of affecting how one feels. Gee whiz, what a crime. The spectrum of psychoactive substances ranges from all kinds of things. Oh, here they're mentioning the coffee and the tea now. But even if such psychoactive substances can be used morally, they can certainly be abused and used immorally. And that goes for just about everything. So that's not really any kind of problem. That's just mental control. So now let's get a little more normal on the broadcast, and we're going to talk about sports now. Hey, who's a football fan? Like a little football? How about some NFL? Maybe your kid is in, I played football. I played a year of that in high school. That was fun. And, of course, I live in Canada, so there wasn't really an option to develop too much as a football player. But the NFL is a big thing. Of course, the Super Bowl goes on every year. And if you want to participate in the benefits of the NFL and you're good enough to play in the NFL, one of the great things that you can do is suffer through the zero marijuana tolerance policy, which they will punish you for in such a severe way, it actually outclasses beating your wife up in an elevator. But here we go to the sports. This is from truthout.org. The NFL is receiving critical media attention for its failure to follow through with a promised commitment to advance scientific knowledge about the link between football and brain trauma. In 2012, the NFL promised $30 million to the National Institute of Health to help fund medical research related to the effects of football and concussions on mental health. But recent reporting suggests the NFL only followed through with less than half of those funds, while ensuring that the money could not be used to fund a Boston University study on brain trauma and football, despite the gift supposedly coming with no strings attached. In the House of Representatives, an investigation from the Committee on Energy and Commerce concluded the NFL acted improperly in attempting to influence the outcome of the grant funding process. But the problem is with these guys, you're banging your head around forever, and then you get this brain disease that it starts to shrink and turn into a cork. And it turns out that marijuana medical use has been shown to do wonderful things for CTE, that disease where you've bashed your brains in. So the NFL really ought to get on that more than, give the players a hard time for partaking in cannabis. It's probably those guys are in better shape to play the game next week than the guys that aren't doing it. Right. So that's a big change. Then everybody wants to say, well, I don't know if we can get away with this. What about the children? What about the children? What about the children? You're all concerned about the children, but you repress and bury the story of Dreher's Jamaican pregnancy study. This is from April 22nd, 2006, 11 years ago, talking about a medical study that is constantly ignored. You can find the Dreher study itself at druglibrary.org. But in the 1980s, Melanie Dreher and her colleagues at UMass Amherst began a longitudinal study to assess the well-being of infants and children whose mothers used cannabis during pregnancy. Maybe that's how some of it got in the breast milk. I don't know. The researchers lived in rural Jamaican communities among the women they were studying. 30 cannabis-using pregnant women were matched for age and socioeconomic status with 30 non-users. Dreher et al. Compared the course of their pregnancies and their neonatal outcomes using various standard scales. No differences were detected 3 days after birth. At 30 days, the exposed babies did better than the non-exposed babies on all of the scales and significantly better on 2 of the scales, having to do with autonomic stability and reflexes, which is completely easy to understand when you're having a kid that's having hundreds of seizures a week or a day, a ridiculous number. We don't know exactly why those seizures took place, but there are studies showing some problems with some things that we put in our body, whether you're a vaccine person or not. winds up, a lot of kids have these seizures and these problems, and this stuff flattens it out. Now you're finding out from the 80s that this Dreher study, which no one ever quotes, who says, what about the children? This study shows on the formation of the brain in vitro in the first place when the kid comes out. So they're actually doing better later on in some aspects. Follow-up studies were conducted when the kids were 4 and 5, just before entering school and after. Their moms were defined as light users, 1 to 10 spliffs a week, moderate users from 11 to 20 spliffs, and heavy from 21 to 70. Consumption of ganja tea was also taken into account. Then they measured them at age 4 using 3 sets of criteria, measuring verbal ability, perceptivity, quantitative skills, memory and motor, and a behavioral style scale measuring temperament based on a 72-item questionnaire, finding no differences at all. It goes on like that. It gets better. They stayed with these kids for years and years. The Dreher study, look that up. And ask the next punk politician, freak out, alarmist, reefer madness jackass exactly what they know about the Dreher's Jamaican pregnancy study about women using cannabis in vitro, having great kids who are healthy. How about that shit? Just going to wrap it up here, folks, pretty soon. Getting kind of tired of trying to explain that when you aren't given an option and there's a medical healthful property out there, that the exchange of information and repression of information is either keeping you away from or keeping you in fear about, you got to get rid of that thing. You got to get rid of the control measure that causes that. But we're running on a little bit of a tribal system here where everybody's supposed to do what everybody else thinks you're supposed to do. And as soon as you put yourself ahead or decide to take something different from the greater pile, that individualism is a problem for the folks that don't want you to step out of line. And you think these laws are cast in stone. They are not cast in stone, and we're going to need to peel them back. And I know from personal experience that disagreeing with the mindset of the many, your doctor, the big hospitals, it can generate fear in the person who's listening to you taking on this challenge. And they just want you to do the regular things and stay on the regular points. Specifically chemo, and don't, say too many things out of line, and make sure you understand that gentleman's gone to school for years. And I get all that, and I don't disrespect the information that they've pulled in. I disrespect the information they're deliberately choosing to ignore. Not the information itself, but the repression of that information. It's no good. It needs to stop. And before we go, I would like to invite you to come to Puff Jam on Saturday, August, 12th, Russell? Yeah. It's also happening on Friday evening, but it's on Puff Jam. Let me see if I can find the actual thing before we get going. I'm going to tell you all about it. This is something that's been going on for 4 years now. And it's an annual event, 2 or 3 days at a time, every summer. It's going to be a great weekend, let's hope. And Puff Jam is in Burlington, Ontario. And there are people there that understand what this stuff can actually do for you. And everybody gets it there. So you just feel like you don't have to fight. You don't have to defend yourself for something that works just fantastic. It's a 2-day family gathering with music, comedy, and camping, and it's just outside of Burlington, Ontario this year. We've got a stage. It's off-grid. There are solar power, live music, late-night comedy, acoustic jams, a green market, vendors, children's activities, and more. It's a fun event. Anybody having a good time? If you're interested, send an email to puffmama@gmail.com. PUFFMAMA @gmail.com. A lot of great bands are going to be there. Lo-Fi, Road Waves. Dan Walsh is going to be there. And it's $20, $30 or $40, depending how long you're going to be there. But just go on Facebook and punch in Puff Jam, and there it is. So, folks, that is going to bring Green Crush to close this week. Remember, it's all about exercising your autonomy. It's all about finding the real information. It's all about not putting up with being told you can't do something by a made-up construct that doesn't really need to be there. And it's also about Googling Granny Crow's Storm List, because that's got every single medical condition pretty much known to man that's positively affected by cannabis. And it's a long read. So that's good news. But let's try to help you get out of that particular situation, so that you're no longer suffering. And you're now understanding that you can plant something in your house and grow it, and it can eliminate your need for opioids and anti-anxiety medication and all kinds. And if you want to take those things too anyway, just try this, see where it goes. I think you'll find that this stuff is highly effective. And use it properly. Of course, use it properly. Everything comes with an instruction manual. Anything not used properly is a problem. So let's just stop pretending that's a category for cannabis only. It's kind of silly, really. So at this time, we will slide on away and say, consider the vitamin. Consider it a fruit. Consider it a stimulant. Consider it a relaxant. Consider it available. And consider it not a problem at all. If somebody wearing a robe or a badge tells you you're not allowed to have it, just understand that even though you might go through some problems for some while with those people, you're the one on the right side of history, not them.
Is 420 camping your thing? Do you like cannabis cups? Want to learn more about cannabis? Enjoy music festivals? Living on the East Coast or looking for a really good reason to visit? Then Harvest Fest is calling your name.
Join us the weekend of July 14th to 16th at Fox Mountain Camping Park in the Annapolis Valley, Nova Scotia, to meet like-minded people, have your cannabis questions answered, listen to great bands, and have a blast.
Service lots available and camping is included in festival admission. $60 for the weekend or $30 for Friday and $40 for Saturday. Food trucks, hot showers, flush toilets, and accessible washrooms. Rolling contest sponsored by Canadian Lumber Limited, with chances to win a case of rolling papers and more throughout the weekend.
For info about attending or vending, email chair@mumm.ca. Hope to see you there.
Are you a cannabis content creator? Are you looking for a place to have your content seen? If you answer yes to both questions, then you need to check out cbgtv.com. We are the Cannabis Broadcasting Group here.